Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to our Certain POV Dark Knight, Fortnight, Batman video game special episode. And as part of that, we are joined by two other members of the Certain POV network, the Real Movie Critic and the Cine Guy themselves, Hans Martin Jr. and Stephen Angulo. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
So glad to have you both here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
We are no strangers to talking about not only just comic book characters, and not just Batman, but just comic books in the broad, Stephen having done stuff related to comics for side quests, and Hans as well, Marvel vs. Capcom specifically. And so, like, those kinds of games, you know, are no stranger to this. We brought Hans on to talk about fighting games in more depth a while back as well. But today we're here to talk about the history of Batman in video games, because he's had a really strange relationship to games. You know, it's very easy to forget with the existence of the Arkham and Telltale games that, like, Batman, deep in either detective work or stealth, is kind of ubiquitous with the Batman properties now. But back in the day, it was more arcadey and a lot less logical. And, like, my earliest memory of playing a Batman video game was the game based on the '89 Batman movie. That was like this wash of blue sprites. It looked really cool, but I remember playing it going, this doesn't have much to do with comic books. I don't know why. Who am I fighting? These aren't his rogues gallery. What are these villains? I think it's just really
What's wrong with Heatwave?
Yeah.
What's wrong with Heatwave?
But it's really interesting to me now that it's kind of become ubiquitous in the other way, a lot like comic book movies in general. This idea that Batman's he's a video game character, just like Spider-Man's a video game character. You know, these games have no ties to other properties. They're their own original narratives and original properties. I guess to start, like, let's go around the room and talk about some of the earliest Batman games we've played. Steven, I'm sure it'll be something from 10 years ago because he's a baby, but the rest of us go back much further. But, like, I guess let's start with Geoff, then we'll go to Steven and then Hans. Like, what do you remember the first Batman game you played?
I do. It was Batman Forever for the Game Gear.
Oh, I feel like this has come up before.
It probably has, because the Game Gear is just such a fun thing to talk about. It's weird. And the Batman Forever video game in general, regardless of platform, was a strange beast. It was built on the Mortal Kombat 2 engine. And on the SNES and Sega Genesis used digitized sprites, felt very much like that, and as such was kind of a train wreck of making a platform-ish beat-em-up game built on the Mortal Kombat 2 engine, which, not a bad engine, but isn't exactly versatile. And the Game Gear release drew a lot of praise for how faithful the graphics were to the home console versions, but I didn't know any better. I wasn't reading reviews. This was just something that was given to me as a gift, and I played it a lot. And I got an inbox. It had an instruction manual. I didn't fully understand what I was doing. There was a lot of selecting whichever gadgets you had to work with, and it was built on the back also of the Batman Forever movie, which this is not the forum to be airing grievances about the Batman Forever movie, but it came out at just the right time for my age and getting into video games or, you know, games of my own. And rather than the Tim Burton films, you know, I guess I grew into the Schumacher era. And so, yeah, that was my first Batman game. I didn't play the NES Batman games until I was already a man. And by then it was pixelated.
What about you, Stephen?
All right, so yes, I am the baby here. So my game knowledge resonates between like the early 2000s. Now, growing up, my games were very limited. I had a PS1 and GameCube as my first game consoles. So I didn't really grow up with, like, you know, many like the NES Batman games or even the ones for PS2. I didn't have one back then. But the one game that pretty much started off my whole Batman, I guess, video game journey was the movie tie-in game Batman Begins.
Yeah.
I was crazy about movie tie-in games back then because, like, oh, I saw the movie, I want to play the game. So
right.
Every game you see, like, from like GameCube is like movie tie-in, Madagascar, Flushed Away, and all that stuff. But then Batman Begins, I like to call it the baby Arkham because it's pretty much the same thing. You follow, like, you know, stealth, beat 'em up and all that stuff, and the takedowns are awesome. Basically, it's the first game where you actually become the Dark Knight. and it's just a lot of fun. It has a place in my heart, especially same with the movie because I love the Nolanverse films. So yeah, Batman Begins. That was like, I think that was my first time as a kid playing a rather. It's rated for teen, but it was very mature. Not like Spider-Man 2. That was more like campy, but still a lot of fun.
Also, next week you'll hear one of 2 side quest episodes with Steven about Batman Begins. But I remember that game very well as well because I, being a little older than Steven, I had already been burned by many a movie tie-in game, as they tend to be of a lower quality. Batman Begins and Spider-Man 2 aside, because they broke the mold as far as those kinds of games. But I remember playing Batman Begins and going, oh, this is actually fun. Like being pleasantly surprised that it was actually a pretty good game. And more that I think about it now that you mention it, Steven, it does feel like it was like the stepping stone to get us to the Arkham games, which I am very grateful for. What about you, Hans?
Well, I'm in the same boat as you, Matt. My first Batman game was the NES 1989 Batman game. The problem is I barely remembered it. I literally had to go to YouTube and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this game was hard. For me as a 5-year-old kid playing this game. It was hard.
It was an NES game, and there's only like 5 levels. They've got to make it hard. That's what they did.
Yeah. I don't think I made it past the second level. I don't know. But, but let me add something else to it. Do y'all remember, probably Steven won't, but do y'all remember the Tiger handheld games?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah, Tiger Electronics.
Unfortunately, yes, I do remember those.
These movement cell games. They were awful. Yeah.
Is that a Game Boy? I don't know what that is.
Kind of. But yes, I had a Batman Tiger handheld game as well. And I don't think I beat that one either. So
No.
I had a bunch of those Tiger handhelds as a kid. I didn't beat many of them. I think the only one I ever beat was an X-Men one. But I had like 5 or 6 of them. So
yeah.
That is no great shame.
Yeah, those games were always very much like, oh, I know Matt likes Spider-Man. I'll buy him this game with Spider-Man on it. And
it's $12 or whatever it was.
This is really cheap. His video games are usually so expensive. I'll buy him this cheap thing. It must be great because it's so cheap.
It's got the art around the little screen that is less sophisticated than a calculator watch. Fantastic.
Man. They were popular back in the day.
So popular.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had several of them. They were popular.
They were very popular.
Look, I was the idiot that owned an R-Zone as a kid.
Yes! I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was dumb enough to have an R-Zone, but smart enough to not have a game com, as far as Tiger Electronics go. Steven, and any listeners that are just like, I'm sorry, what? You are just making
what are these
shit
old
up
men
right
talking
now.
about?
The Tiger handheld games were,
these things, right?
Yep.
That's what they are.
I think they came with my
like
Happy Meal at
regular-
McDonald's a long time ago.
Essentially,
like
yeah,
that.
that was how cheap and easy they were to make. They were Game & Watch games. They were a little bit of a backdrop thing, and it wasn't like a processor showing different graphics. It was pre-rendered or like pre-drawn, whatever. Like if you reset the screen, it would flash every sprite at once.
Yeah.
It just filled the screen, and it just chose which of them to light up. So it was just a weird, very primitive kind of thing that, as a kid, was also fun. The R-Zone was made by the same company, Tiger Electronics, that was a continuation of this, but done in the guise of a VR helmet that you like wore as a headband, and it shot like Virtual Boy red LED onto a little reflective glass, and that's what you'd look at. So there wasn't even a background. You're just standing there looking like the coolest kid to ever get an atomic wedgie with this thing on your head and the controller in your hands as you try to play Virtua Fighter with just the little pre-rendered kind of things. The Gamecom was their last hurrah, which was a proper handheld system that was really a lot of cool features way ahead of their time that they just did not have the means to do. I think it was the first handheld system to have internet connectivity and a touch screen. And it, in fact, did get a Batman game. It got the Batman Return of the Joker for PS1. It also had a Gamecom adaptation.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah, there's your fun history lesson about a handheld lineage that few need to care about. You're welcome.
Yes.
Diving deeper into this, I think it's really interesting looking at Batman games that not only has he appeared in tons of his own games, but in Justice League games. And there was, of course, DC versus Mortal Kombat before,
Yes.
they started making their own DC games. Famously, we've talked about Infamous, and we'll at some point talk about Infamous 2 on Men of
Injustice.
Steel. Oh, Injustice. Sorry, you're right.
Infamous is a completely different
Different franchise. Injustice 1 and 2. But what's really interesting about, I'd say, the middle years of the Batman stuff, and we teased on this, is that it was so tied to existing properties. Some of my fondest memories of not great games were after the success of the Bruce Timm-averse and the animated series, arguably some of the best Batman content ever made. They made a bunch of games based on that and the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, and like they had this weird cell shading 3D animation, and like I just remember them being fun, but I don't remember anything about them. I think my biggest problem with Batman and video games is that nothing really stuck for me until the later fighting games, and then of course the Arkham series. I feel like everything that came before was touching on what we loved about Batman, but never felt like a true Batman experience, and that's why they tend to fall out of our heads.
Well, it's sort of tied into the du jour design of video games of the time. You would get platformers, you'd get beat-em-up games, and the good early Batman games, the well-remembered ones, the well-regarded ones, very much leaned into that. And the rise of those genres, the rise of those games came along with, there were only 2 Batman video games ever released before the 1989 film, just, rise of video games, rise of that kind of thing. And as beat-em-ups kind of got stagnant, so too did those games. And really the best you could do to feel like Batman with those was give him cool gadgets.
Yeah.
The fact that, the Arkham games and recent Batman titles have leaned into the detective work, have leaned into the stealth, have leaned into all of those, which existed in their way at the time. But I don't think anyone wanted a Batman point-and-click game. I don't think anyone quite wanted the top-down stealth, an MSX-style stealth game of Batman. It needed to come into its own, and so they were kind of being charitable. They were doing the best they could with what was popular and known of the time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it was name brand recognition, right? Like, we
obviously.
have this name, famously I'm always reminded of when thinking about bad tie-in games like the Thor game that was the Xbox 360 generation. Like, most people don't even know there was a Thor game.
I didn't know
but
that.
there
Wasn't
was.
it even based on the Dark World?
So I think it like followed this original story, but it was based on the early Thor MCU movies. But like it had this like pseudo God of War play style, but it wasn't obviously anywhere near as good technically as God of War was. And so like I think what's fascinating about Batman among other comic book characters, especially, is that the name itself sold those games in a way that I feel like the Thor game sold at the time because there was a Thor movie. And I'm sure there were other Thor games of some kind, but like definitely not as common or well known. Batman, like Superman and Spider-Man and Wolverine and some other characters, is pretty ubiquitous now. It's rare that you would probably find someone who doesn't know who Batman is. It's possible, but it's unlikely. And so I think that's what a lot of those games carried, and that's why they felt like they could get away with a lot more. It's very easy because of how good the Arkham games are and how good the Telltale games are to like overshadow the other games and just pretend like they don't exist. But Steven makes a good point, is like games of that PS2, PS3 generation, like that's when Batman was finding his footing, outside of fighting games or beat 'em ups, because Batman Begins wasn't a certain kind of game, right? It felt like a beat 'em up. It felt like it had some stealth elements. Like it seemed, I mean, I guess the best thing I could compare it to is like Metal Gear Solid without guns a little bit, right? Because it kind of had that third person look, but it wasn't fitting into a genre specifically in the same way like Batman 89 was a side-scrolling action platformer. And I think that's where, I think also Batman as a character is more versatile than a lot of other characters. It's why Superman hasn't really worked in video games at all, except for the fighting games, because how do you make a game about an invincible character? Whereas Batman, obviously, if someone shoots him, he's dead. Like if they put a gun to his chest, he's dead. Getting that close to Batman, probably won't happen, but that kind of thing.
As well as representing what his abilities are. Having flight in a video game has happened.
Yeah.
Continues to happen, will continue to happen. Representing Green Lantern and the infinite creativity of what the Ring does maybe will be adapted into a video game one day. I'm not holding my breath about it. The Flash can be a little tricky sometimes. We get better with that as far as speed and things like that and what have you. Aquaman, are you going to have a dialogue tree with fish? I know he does more than that, but if you don't talk to fish in an Aquaman game, people will riot. Batman, what does he do? He's kind of a ninja, but he's rich and has cool gadgets and things. Great. So if we wanted to really lean into that, between levels, you spend money on new gadget. Like, it's easy to encapsulate enough of who he is with very, for lack of a better term, basic video game design. And he really did need to find his footing. And I think I'm going to throw this into the ring. Assassin's Creed was really the blueprint.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If not directly, culturally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the early Assassin's Creed games, at least from the stealth perspective, definitely gave us a way to move through those spaces in a way that we didn't think we could. I mean, also
and rooftop traversal.
Yeah. I mean, I will say though about the Arkham games, Arkham Asylum tends to be my favorite of that series. Though I go back and forth because it felt like a 3D Metroidvania, right? You had to go to a place, get a thing, and then when you get to this next place, you couldn't progress because you didn't have another thing you needed. So then you'd have to go to the Batmobile or go to the courtyard or go to a different building. Like, I like that kind of like Batman's trying to figure out how to get through this stuff. Whereas the later games, like I like Arkham City and I like Arkham Knight, but they're more open, more, kind of, they feel more streamlined or in a straight line than the earlier games. I think Batman's at his strength when he's relatable to us and when we can kind of spend time with the character. I think that's why these more recent games have also, because of voice acting and things like that, like Batman is about the theatrics of the character, right? Striking fear, all of that stuff. Can't really get that out of a Nintendo or Super Nintendo game in the same way.
Nope.
Maybe someone could do it these days, knowing what we know now, but definitely not 80s, 90s.
Definitely not.
Not at all, no.
But I think also Asylum works for, and Matt, you're not alone in Arkham Asylum being kind of a favorite. Like, Arkham City, Origins, Arkham Knight aren't bad games.
Right.
But it's just that kind of thing of, but Arkham Asylum, because it feels like you're working a case almost. I know it's an incident, and I know you're fighting all of the inmates, and it's a whole thing, but it feels much more of a like one bad night or working one case versus having a far more open world setting. And I do want to point out, again, I guess I'm very much the handheld guy. Did any of you see anything about Arkham Origins Blackgate on the PS Vita?
I'd heard about it, but I had not actually played it because I don't own a Vita.
Yeah, same here.
It's fair. I think it was on some other handheld systems as well, but the Vita stood out to me because, well, it's the version I played, as well as the fact that something very cool that they did. Again, going back to the notion of Batman's gadgets, which I know there's a lot of comic book stuff and a lot of things where it's not about gadgets. But the suit itself is a freaking gadget. The Batmobile's a gadget. But the hacking mechanic of Blackgate, you could do it like standard with like D-pad or touchscreen, but you could also, because the Vita has cameras built into it, you kind of had like a little handheld hacking device as Batman in the Arkham games.
Right.
You would actually kind of like hold it and move it around in like an augmented reality kind of way to get to where the password was. So both Sarah and I had a great deal of fun, riding the subway to wherever we were going and just sitting there and just kind of moving the Vita around. I'm Batman. It was great immersion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about Batman, for me at least, as a character, is like when the games make me feel like him, I think that's when I'm in it the most, right? We want to bond with these characters, some of our favorite games that I know we've all talked about over the course of side quests. It's like when you feel like that character, right? I remember in Steven's episode about Spider-Man 2, like the reason that game took off is because you feel like Spider-Man. Swinging through the city felt like Spider-Man. And I think the reason I love the Arkham series so much, and I've played so much more of it than any other Batman game, is because that first game, especially Asylum, you're like, not only does it feel like Batman, you're being stealthy, you're scaring the hell out of these common crooks, but also it's got Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill,
exactly,
who, as we've all talked about, especially on the Screen Snark episode that aired earlier this week with you two, like, we can argue to the end of the day who our favorite Batman is or what our favorite property is, but no one will argue that the voices of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are iconic to those characters and so tied to them. I'm curious for Hans and Steven, Have there ever been moments in a Batman video game where like you really felt like I'm this character, like really immersed in those worlds? I have to assume it has to be with the Arkham games, but I know Steven's played a bunch of other games besides that as well.
Oh,
I mean, that is my answer. Is Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, same here with the Arkham games.
I feel like we all had that moment during the opening of Arkham Asylum while they're coming in and you're hearing the voices again for the first time in forever. That was just incredible.
Yeah, like I guess for like a more open feeling, where it's like split between different levels, it might be Lego Batman, because you get to play as Batman, and when you're constructing, solving all these mysteries to like, taking down one villain per level. It's kind of like that, but definitely with the Arkham, because you get to like immerse in his true psychology of being the Batman pretty much. For me, the first one was Arkham City, because I find myself like every time Batman's the reason I have new game consoles. I got a PS2 because of Lego Batman, and I got a PS3 because of Arkham City. So it's pretty much like helping me build up my video game knowledge right there. But yeah, definitely with the Arkham games when it comes to being the Batman.
And it's worth mentioning, now that you mentioned the Lego Batman games and the Lego games in general, I really enjoyed it because for what it is that it's a game for kids, but it's not that easy.
No.
It's really not. And I think it's a great game. Like if any of us have kids, it'll be a great game to play with your kids,
Yeah,
and have you all figured it out together. That's one thing I enjoy about the Lego games. But to answer your question, Matt, how can it not be Arkham Asylum? You really have everything that you need in a Batman game except for the Batmobile,
Right. Well, it's there. It's just parked. You can't drive it.
You can't drive it, unfortunately. And not only that, you get all not all of them, but most of the villains that Batman, he has iconic villains. And yeah, I just love how the different levels is like, pertains to that villain. It is always different, so you have to use different things. And just like how any Batman movie or cartoon, whatever, that's what he has to do. He has to figure it out. I just love it, just hiding up in the roofs and then surprising the characters, just zip down and grabbing them. That's awesome. That's the things that you love about Batman, that's for sure.
Indeed. Anyone still shows up from that Killer Croc level? You never know when he's gonna come out.
Dude, that gives me anxiety, that level.
Yeah, deeply evocative stages within Asylum. The Asylum games are definitely in that like far more gritty realism, even though there's ties to the animated series. But then the Scarecrow sequences.
Oh
happen.
my god!
And this is absolutely something that only works in a video game in terms of visuals and the feeling that you get. And like, what a different kind of fear. But yeah, no, Killer Croc was just like, my blood pressure is rising just thinking about it. It was incredible.
Well, what I love about that is like Batman is about fear, manipulating fear, but there have been moments where Batman has been made to be afraid or lost his grip, and like the way they convey it, you're right. Like that whole Scarecrow sequence. I remember when it first happened, I freaked out. Like I got anxious. I was like, oh my God, did the game break? What's going on?
Yeah.
Like it was very creepypasta kind of like, oh no, the game's alive kind of a moment. And then even the Killer Croc stuff. What I love about the Killer Croc stuff is Batman in that moment is not scared. He's not even worried. Yet there's no music. There's a little background noise. You can hear your footsteps. You hear Killer Croc under the water. Like Batman's not afraid, but the person controlling him sure as shit is. Like, the ambiance in the Arkham games, I think, are unequivocally some of the best in gaming across the board. And like, what I love, my favorite thing about Arkham Asylum specifically, although I do love all of the games, I replayed them all within the last year and a half and played Arkham Origins for the first time, which I think got a bad rap. I think
it's a good game.
For what it is, even though it doesn't have Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, like it's still a good story. It's a nice homage to year one and the early Batman days. And it's a smaller scale. And I feel like, considering how gigantic Arkham Knight is, it was nice to play that game between City and Night to kind of be like a palate cleanser. But like, Arkham Asylum was one of the in the heyday of me being a collector. I had the Xbox 360. I was an achievement hunter. One might say an achievement whore. And so like I loved completing games in that way. But the Riddler trophies in the first game, I think is the most approachable number. I've gotten them in City and Origins as well. I haven't gotten them in Night because there's just too many. But like the reward for that, we're talking about voice acting, like the person playing the Riddler is so good in that game, but you never see him. You only hear him. And like, I guess spoilers for Asylum if you've not beaten it, but like as you collect the Riddler trophies, Batman does things that are kind of subtle, like he uploads GPS data, he logs into the police system, like as you collect more trophies. And then that section ends with a phone call to the Riddler, him bragging about how you'll never catch him even if you found all the trophies, and then the police barging in and arresting him because they found him. Because Batman, while playing this game with the Riddler, solved the crime. And I always think things like that is really cool. You know, I like in the later games when you actually interact with the Riddler and like you have to fight him and go after him. But like by the time I got to Arkham Knight, there's a proper fight with the Riddler and like a mech. And I'm like, this like, I feel like it lost its way. Like the subtlety in that first game, I think is where a lot of the strength lies that we lose as the game goes on.
Probably the weakest part of Arkham Asylum is the fact that it has to, I suppose, finish with the Titan fight with the Joker. Yeah. When so many of the other encounters are built around the relationship that Batman has with them or the sort of encounters that they have, fist fighting the Riddler just feels cruel.
I agree.
It's a battle of wits. That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
And so to have those is a wonderful thing, and to have, whether it's enough storage space, development time, whatever, to go into those different directions and have those it's a joy, and it's something that so many games benefit from, most of all the Batman games. And I do want to take a moment and also bring up Detective Vision as a great addition, and that's something that has had many forms, again, in 3D games since. And I don't think Detective Vision, like, that was the first time something like that came up. But the idea of how do you portray the world's greatest detective when my dumb ass is holding a controller? Well, you have a thing where he notices the clues. You know, it's rolling an investigation check in Dungeons and Dragons, and the DM tells you things you notice because, you know, the wizard's got a high intelligence. I don't know. Batman can notice these things. Oh, he sees where the cracks are. Oh, he notices this movement. Cool. And it's like, what if I have Detective Vision on all the time? Well, you lose out on a bit of the ambiance, but you're going to be a great detective.
I know people that have done that. They just put Detective Vision the whole game, and it says it does make it easier. So,
really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All that staticky atmosphere and all that stuff? That seems a lot. It seems like a lot.
Well, because you can see you see where enemies are, you see where the important things are. It's like having an overlay of a mini map at all times.
Exactly.
You can see what's going on. It's useful.
Yeah.
And it's there again. You don't lose anything in having it on all the time. Mechanically speaking, there's no resource you're depleting. There's no achievements you're not getting because you're using you're a detective using Detective Vision. How dare you? But you choose to engage with that at your own pace, and whether that's meant to be an accessibility thing or dynamic difficulty, whether it's intended or not, it is. And that was a 2009 game, and we're well past that, and people are still trying to figure and navigate that kind of design. So props.
Yeah, speaking about that Detective Vision, how frustrated you get when you're trying to figure out something in the games and you have to go to, I don't know if GameFAQ's still a thing or not, but
it is.
Yeah,
it sure is.
And
the Zelda problem of I applied all the things I have to all the things I found. Why isn't anything happening?
Exactly. At least with the Detective Vision, that's a tool, and that's how I did it. If I get stuck, and it's my last resort.
Yeah, or you're in a room and it's like, did I do everything? Did I find everything? Hang on, like last sweep or last resort.
Exactly.
It's very useful like that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You know what Detective Vision reminds me of? Have you guys played that James Bond game called Bloodstone?
I've not.
No, I haven't.
It has something like that, except you're looking at a smartphone, and it's kind of, you see like in the background, X-ray vision. There's your enemy right there, making sure, they got a gun. Okay, that's who you take down first. So you can kind of see like the inspiration that Detective Vision kind of gives to like other prior video games.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, Batman: The Dark Knight had a similar thing to Detective Vision, doing it in a very not moral way, as Lucius likes to remind us in that film. But like this idea that you're scanning everything around you like a bat to show this kind of Detective Vision. And like, it's just very cool to see those parallels. For me, the reason the Arkham series will always be the MVP is like, I'd played them all as they first came out. Like Steven, for Arkham Knight, I bought a PS4 so I could play Arkham Knight. Like that was the game to get me to buy the PS4. I replayed them, I think, starting early last year. And so I started with Arkham. I have most of them on PC now, except for Knight, which I still have on PS4. And like, I don't have a lot to critique about them. I do think that Arkham Asylum, I think, is still the tightest package. I have the least to complain about with that. And I'd say same for Arkham Origins, other than, of course, the voice actors are different, which is what it is. I think it's also a pretty tight game in the same way. It's a smaller scale Arkham City, which works. My biggest problems with Arkham City and Arkham Knight is the scope, because the traversal time is cool and getting a sense of the city is cool and flying around as Batman is cool. But by the end of the game, you've done it so much. It's like, and you can fast travel. I think the confines of Arkham Asylum just makes the game feel more atmospheric in a way that we don't get from City and Knight. And I love driving the Batmobile, and I get why they turn the Batmobile into a tank. It's under military lockdown. The Arkham Knight is a military expert, it seems. And I love driving. When you drive from one end of Gotham to the other in the Batmobile, that's cool as heck. But every tank battle just sucks. I don't mind playing them now. They're not even particularly that hard per se. It's just, it feels...
a nuisance.
Yeah, it feels like a nuisance. If there were a handful of them, cool. I like diversity. I like disarming the bombs. I like solving puzzles in the tank. That was cool. But the tank fights just feel like it's like if Arkham was only the fist fights and not the stealth fights, right? It just felt very bludgeony for what Batman is, the detective stuff. It feels like we'd gotten so far from it. No, of course, Batman's desperate. He could die. He's trying to take out his greatest adversary, all of that stuff. But it just seems like by that game it had lost his way. Now we are going to be getting Kill the Suicide Squad takes place in that Arkham universe, and Gotham Knights is going to play in a similar style to the Arkham games, but not be in that universe. It's in a separate universe, supposedly. But I'm just curious where these games go from here, especially now that we have the Bat family without Batman. They're all detectives also, to a degree, but some of them have more strengths than others. So I'm curious how that evolves. Is there anything, this is a long-winded way to come back to ask y'all, do you have something you want from a Batman game that you haven't gotten yet? Is there something you can think of that really hasn't been given to us yet in a Batman game?
That's a tough one. Because basically with the Arkham series, it exceeded all expectations. We got everything we wanted in a Batman game. But maybe a bit more bigger. I mean, imagine GTA Batman. It's just open world and you just kick everybody's ass and all that stuff. But also, why not expand on the vehicles? Why just the Batwing? Why not the Batwing? Maybe the Batbone, all that stuff. Expand on Batman's arsenal. Is that how you say it?
Arsenal.
Arsenal. Oh my gosh, yes, on his arsenal. Pretty much just explore more, pretty much. Or who knows? Maybe have one of the Justice League team up with him. Have a Superman level. Have a Green Arrow level. Explore all the locations. Go to Central City. Meet the Flash and all that stuff. Give us
and shark spray. Get a shark spray.
Exactly. Put in King Shark. Put in King Shark. Do anything you want. Just make it an explosive game.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, GTA Batman. I'm down for that. That's for sure. I mean, for me, mine's is a little more silly, but I would love kind of like a Mario Kart game with the Justice League with Batman in it. I think, it'd be fun. Batman has a Batmobile, because each hero has their own kind of car-ish per se, and just have fun with it. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. In one of the Injustice games, did they have something like that?
Racing?
I don't remember. Yeah.
I know the Mortal Kombat games.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Okay.
One of the Mortal Kombat games had a kart racer built
Yes,
in.
now I remember. Which
was delightful and ridiculous.
Yes,
and I think
fun.
An absurdist Justice League kart racer, as a mode in a larger game, I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I think so too.
One of the joys of Batman is the versatility and the fact that you can put a very stern, taciturn, the prototype of the modern gritty video game protagonist wherever you want. And sometimes it works and sometimes it just stands out as a goofy thing. And to that point, I mean, the Lego Batman games, when y'all were talking about it, I realized it's the best possible adaptation of Adam West era Batman.
Yes, I agree.
That certain amount of, it's very colorful, kind of garish, kind of goofy, kind of wacky, but we're having a great time. And, you can accept any of this stuff with Lego because it's just toys. We're just bashing toys together. And it fits that and it suits that. I think something I would want to see in future Gotham titles, Batman titles, is I've also not been keeping up on Gotham Knights because, again, I very much like to media blackout as much as I can when games I'm excited about are happening. They've already got my money. I don't need to watch the trailers over and over and be spoiled on things. And not even storyline-wise, but be like, I don't want to have to wait for this scene over and over again. I want the jokes to land or whatever. I think it'd be kind of cool if you're actually dealing with a lot of different characters, because I love the exploration of the Bat family sans Batman. Like, what does working with the Dark Knight do to you, for you, and amongst your peers? And if you have, like, squad-based missions with fellow, like, Bat family characters, I think it'd be super cool. That would be an interesting local or online multiplayer thing, or just working with the AI as good as, I mean, AI is getting better as far as in-game AI goes, but if you want to like have a coordinated mission, like you're playing as Tim Drake and you are coordinating when Jason comes in on something or whatever else, and you have to work with that, deal with that, I think that'd be a really fun thing to explore.
Yeah, the teamwork aspect hasn't been explored. Like, that's something that Arkham Knight did do well, right? Like the missions that you run with Nightwing and the missions that you run with Catwoman, you can trade in, like you hit the shoulder button and they swap during a combo and stuff.
Right.
That kind of stuff is really cool. Having that kind of coordinated attacking and puzzle solving in a fuller game could be a lot of fun. I could see that totally.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're all such interesting characters, and they all and I'm excited to see what different skill sets or how you switch up the play style in that way, because there's a lot of fun to be had there.
Yeah, I think for me, like what I want to see Batman do more is interact with other heroes, sort of like what Steven's talking about, but I think even on a more granular level and a character level, like some of my favorite things about Batman and Superman is that they're best friends. Like they aren't always open and warm with each other, but they are clearly best friends who respect and care about each other. And like I would love to see that dynamic in the Arkham games. I mean, the Arkham games do a great job of showing Alfred's relationship with Batman and, you know, his relationship to the Bat family as he interacts with them. But like a lot of it is Batman being selfish and trying to take the weight of everything on himself, especially in Arkham Knight. I guess, spoiler alert for a game that's been out for a long time, leads to his quote unquote downfall in a way. And so like, I'm curious to like go rewind the clock and get some time with Batman and these other heroes and how he interacts and how they work together. How cool would it be to like do a level where like Superman's outside fighting a gigantic threat while Batman's inside somewhere trying to stealth take, like against Metallo, like trying to find Metallo's power source or something to take him out while Superman's like actually fighting him and switching between those scenes kind of thing.
Hell yeah.
I mean, the strength of Batman, as much as I like the character, is not Batman. It's his rogues gallery and his connection to other characters, right? He's interesting because of the world he's in. He's an interesting character on his own too, but like, I mean, it's no secret that the Joker is one of my favorite villains, and he's interesting in relationship to Batman also. I feel like there are other villains in other stories that are interesting on their own, and the connection between the characters are strong, but like Batman's villains are way less interesting without Batman because of how they play off each other, their relationships. But, you know, Catwoman and Batman, the Joker and Batman, Scarecrow and Batman, like all of them are like, there's this nature that comes back to Batman's not that different from him. He's a one mental breakdown away from not being that different from them. And they've acknowledged that in the other source material. And so like, I do love in Arkham Knight and in Asylum, or even in City a bit, we get some of that psychology. Like there's hush missions in both Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Knight that like treat Hush as if you've never seen this character before, which I love, but also messes with your head. Like that first scene where Hush unwraps his face after he's trapped you and he looks exactly like you, and it's obviously Kevin Conroy doing the voice but different. Like it's just wild moments like that I really love, because the combat's fine in those games, but for me it's the story moments. It's why, even though we haven't talked about it a ton, the Telltale games are really interesting because those games focus on story and relationships and choices, and I like that we have that world too, where it's not about how quickly you can punch someone out. It's also about these characters and these stories.
Yeah, one more thing I'd like to add for this question, and I know this is not going to happen, all right? But I would love for this to happen. A fighting game of Marvel versus DC. Let's do it. Yeah. That's the only thing. I know it's not going to happen for many reasons, but
We get that 1993 comic book crossover finally in video game form.
Exactly. You know, who doesn't want to see a Superman versus Captain America fight, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And things, or Iron Man versus Batman, who are kind of similar if you really think about it, you know.
Rich guys with a lot of privilege and a lot of
money.
And power armor.
And power armor, yeah, exactly.
Gadgets and everything.
You know, Spider-Man versus Green Lantern, you know, something like that. You know, who doesn't want to play that? Like, seriously.
Well, there have been rumors for years that NetherRealm was secretly working on a Marvel game. There's been no proof of it, but like that, how cool would it be if that's the Marvel game they're working on, right? Especially since Marvel now, like, it used to be that DC would partner with anybody and Marvel was very kind of stingy, but now between the Guardians of the Galaxy game, the Spider-Man and Wolverine games, and like everything else, like Marvel's been Marvel Midnight Suns, which is a strategy game coming out. Like, they have been way more open to partnering with other studios. So it's not while I don't think it'll happen either, Hans, it's not as unreasonable as it would have been 10 years ago, considering how these companies license out these properties more freely now.
Yeah. But I can only dream.
And also, this is a time for kind of reestablishing a new canon. I mean, as you mentioned, Matt, Gotham Knights doesn't seem to be within the Arkham verse, as it were.
Yeah.
And probably one of the big issues that the Batman video games had in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, some of them were based off of the animated series and just weren't all that great. But a bunch of them were also just like, all right, we got to get something going here. The Rise of Sin Tzu. We created a villain specifically for this game. Get hyped about it, guys. A whole new character. The game isn't great, but also trying to get those things rolling now that I think it's also not as big of a deal, or there's enough time or budget or backing to really get things going. I mean, yeah, look at Insomniac's Spider-Man series, which also owes a lot to the Arkham games.
Yeah.
Just quickly and efficiently, to the outside observer, just setting up its own new thing. So, yeah, where the crossovers can happen, or where companies can explore different aspects of a very complex character. I mean, yeah, the interpersonal relationships that Batman has with his wards and his coworkers in the Justice League and everything else is probably one of the last great hurdles of adapting a big aspect of Batman's character consistently and successfully.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
I think that ultimately Batman will always be an interesting character in video games because he seems more versatile than a lot of the other archetypes, because he can be malleable, because he can have shark repellent, because he can have power armor. Like, he can do a lot of things that other characters can't, but is also still kind of an everyman, even though he's a rich white guy. You know, we have our limits. But like, what I'm excited about because this episode is releasing on the day that the new Matt Reeves Batman is in theaters, The Batman. What I'm excited about this new movie is, I'm curious if I'll watch this movie. Often when I go to superhero movies, I go and then go, I want to play a game, right? Like, I always tie superhero experiences back to the video game counterparts. And I'm curious if this version's going to do that. Because based on the trailers and based on everything we've read, it does feel more in line with the Arkham games, and the fact that he's a detective. It's a lot of hand-to-hand combat. He's mysterious. You know, it's the early days of Batman. And so I'm really curious. Also, like, the Riddler is being portrayed very differently, which I'm curious about, right? Because they did change the Riddler a lot in the Arkham games too. He still is the Riddler, but, you know, I think that I'm just curious if the Batman feels video game-like, because a lot of the other movies haven't, depending on the movie, but also what this means for the future of the video games, because these properties succeed together. It is very rare that they're not released within hand in hand. And like recently, Gotham Knights and I believe Kill the Suicide Squad were both pushed back, but they were originally targeting for like a mid-year release this year. And obviously due to COVID and other things have been pushed back. And so I'm just curious where that future lies. I'm excited to see this new movie, but I'm also kind of curious how this will affect the video games going forward. Because it's undeniable that the Arkham series is affected by The Dark Knight, right? That movie set the tone for those games in a big way, especially the face-off between Batman and the Joker. And so I'm just curious how now Matt Reeves' vision will affect that, because it's very particular in the same way Nolan's vision was, right? Yeah. He has a look and a style, and still seems gritty realism which like, look, I like gritty realism, but also one of the main villains is a clown. So like, let's let's take a step back a little. Like when they pull that joy out of the Batman property is when I fail. Like some of my favorite parts of Arkham is the mindfuck moments or the moments where Joker's telling bad jokes and goofing off, because that dichotomy is what makes Batman Batman. And just
exactly,
we don't see a ton of that in this in the Matt Reeves version, but also we've only seen trailers, so it's hard to know, right?
Yeah.
It could take a huge left turn in the theaters.
Also, you're spending tens of hours with Batman and his rogues gallery when you're playing a game versus 2+ hours anytime you watch a movie. So having things be a little dynamic just makes sense. And I think it will give new portrayals to build on, to pull from, even if you don't necessarily get the Batman adaptation video game, which, again, having not seen the movie yet as of this recording, I don't know if I would even want that. But maybe stuff from, Paul Dano's Riddler portrayal, maybe I want to see that in a future Batman game. I mean, think of other iconic film portrayals of these characters, and you sort of adapt them as you can. There's a reason why the only adaptation of Tom Hardy's performance of Bane that I can think of is in the Harley Quinn cartoon, and that was to highlight a certain amount of absurdity. But doesn't mean I don't want to fight Bane in a Batman video game. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Same with the Lego Batman movie. We're opening the Joker's reckoning and all that stuff.
That's right. He does that as well. You're right. And so there again, you have those the broad portrayals. Look, I saw the Lego Batman movie in theaters, and it was probably the most fun I had at the movies in years.
It's true. It's a great movie.
Same here.
It's a great movie on its own. It's a fantastic Batman movie, and the video games around it are you know what? If that's what it is, video game movie adaptations back and forth, they're not all bad.
They're not.
Because Lego Batman exists.
Exactly.
Yeah, I still have to see that one. I haven't seen it yet.
Seriously?
I know.
Matt,
you will love it.
City.
You will love it.
I have
mad.
the
I'm
Blu-rays. Do I have to fly to you right now?
You're going to get to watch the Lego Batman movie for the first time. It's so good.
It's been on my list for a while. I think I just missed it in theaters and then never saw it when it came out of theaters. But
there should be an event where you watch it live and we'll come watch with you. That should be an event.
Yes. Then I can tell you some of the stories of getting to watch this movie surrounded by, there are other adults that didn't have kids, but there were also a lot of kids, and their reactions were part of the enjoyment.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank Hans and Steven for joining us for this discussion of Batman. There's, of course, much, much more to talk about when it comes to Batman and video games. But first, before we start to wrap up, and I ask you what everyone's waiting for, which is, what is your favorite Batman game? Hans, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about what Dark Knight Fortnight is, where this came from, why we're here, why we're doing this?
Yeah, hashtag Dark Knight Fortnight. It's pretty much where we're going to take a couple weeks and all the certain POV, not all of them, but most of them episodes we'll be talking about
participating shows.
Yes, yes, there we go. Where we're gonna be talking about Batman. And I thought, with the movie coming out, it was perfect. And of course, with all the different types of shows that we have, we could really take on the whole medium of what Batman brings. Like this episode, we're talking about the video games and things. We got the movies, we got the comic books, TV shows, everything that we all enjoy about Batman. And because we have a show called Men of Steel, always talk about Superman. I was like, why not Batman? Why not?
Why not Batman?
Exactly. Case sometimes hates on Batman, but it's okay. We still love him. But and I was like, we should do something about that. With our type of network, I think it was perfect, and it's going great. We do have many shows right now, and me and Steven are on a lot of those shows. So,
oh yes,
which was a surprise to me, honestly. But hey, I'm all for it. And yeah, it's been a fun ride. Thanks to y'all for talking about the video games, that's for sure. And yeah, grow and appreciate one of our favorite Dark Crusaders, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hell yeah.
indeed.
I could talk about Batman forever. Pun intended, I guess. Kind of stumbled into that one. But he's a character that I've always loved. He's far from my favorite even DC hero, but he's a character that I've loved. I think because I've just grown up with the character. I mean, the 89 movie aired, 6 years after I was born. And so there's always been Batman in major media for me since I was a kid. But that said, before we wrap up, we should talk about our favorite. We've alluded, and I have some theories as to whose favorite game is which. But I think we should talk about our favorite Batman games, because while the 89 Batman game will always have a special place in my heart as like the first Batman, the first time I was like, I'm playing as Batman in a game. This is so cool. It's not my favorite. I on the day of the week wibble and wobble between Arkham Asylum and Arkham Origins as my favorite Batman game. And here's why. Both stories are centered around the Joker, which is one of my favorite DC characters of all time, but also both stories are contained. You know, as we said earlier in the episode, Arkham Asylum is a very contained story. Arkham Origins is like, what if we took Arkham City, but like cut it in a third? And it was a small, like he's just patrolling this neighborhood and has origins for the Riddler and the Joker and a few others that are seemingly different from the comics and the TV shows. Also, though I can't remember their names off the top of my head, the actors who portrayed Batman and the Joker in that game did a very good job. You know, they weren't trying to be Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy. They were trying to be their own versions. And I like when cartoons and video games have done that with Batman, because we've had an endless list of incredible Batman and Joker voice actors over the years, just in animation and now, of course, in video games as well. But I think I have to go back to Arkham Asylum. I think it just set the tone for what Batman could be in video games that we never envisioned. If you had told me before we got that game that it would exist, I wouldn't be able to even understand how they could make that work. Rocksteady did something with a character. They redefined the character. I think Batman as he exists now is forever changed because of those games. And I just can't think of another video game franchise that has done that. I think Geoff is right. Spider-Man is doing that. I think as we've talked with Yuri on this very show, like Yuri's Spider-Man, his suit appeared Into the Spider-Verse, and like that game is definitely affecting Spider-Man in the same way now. But like, I think Batman set the tone for that, where comic book characters aren't just in comics or movies. The video games can be just as in depth. So yeah, I think I've got to give it to Arkham Asylum, with a caveat that one of my favorite moments in the history of the Arkham franchise, I believe it's in the museum in City, where the floor caves out from under you as Penguin is laughing over you, and you stand up to see Solomon Grundy chained to a wall.
Oh,
that moment
yeah.
in Arkham City is one of the best moments in any of the games, because I mean, I love Solomon Grundy. He's such a stupid character, but I love that character. But I never thought I'd see him in a video game or movie, because it's just such a weird character. He's a zombie. You know, and I just never thought, and for him to be there and you have to actually fight him is just still mind-blowing to me, just like the Clayface fight in that game as well. Like, I just never thought we'd get those scale of Batman villains in games. But yeah, so to sum up, Arkham Asylum is definitely one of the best Batman games ever made, and easily one of my favorites. Geoff, what about you?
I go between two as well, and one of them is Arkham Asylum, and I will second everything you said, and all of the little moments of discovery that you can have in using detective vision to find out who's Clayface. The feeling of sneaking around the vents.
Yeah.
And there's vent sneaking in future Arkham games, but there was just something about how everything just landed and was presented in Arkham Asylum. It was also a game that I was just out of college when it came out, and it was a good use of my time, as well as just a great game for, I mean, I've always thought way too much about video games, always, but that was one of the first games that like really got me going in depth on map design, on gameplay loops, on everything, and it was what a great case study in so many ideas of design. And it's one of those rare games that is not just significant because of when it came out and what it was, but it still holds up. Whether you want to quibble about, I don't know, resolution or things like that, who cares? The game holds up and looks good. And the other one is the original Lego Batman. I don't play a ton of the Lego games. I like them, but I think part of it is the fact that I'm not the bigger Batman fan in my household. My wife is. And so most of my experience with the Arkham games, I've played some of all of them. Sarah's played all of them, like gone crazy on them. And the Lego Batman games, it's got the local multiplayer, and it's such a fun time exploring those characters, exploring the worlds that are there, and getting to have that two-player experience, because there's really not a lot of other two-player Batman experiences. Maybe Gotham Knights will change that. I don't know, probably not. But I appreciated it, I enjoy it, and it's a great game regardless. The sequels are also very good, but much like the Arkham sequels, sometimes more isn't better. It's not bad, but not better. And I like both Lego Batman 1 and Arkham Asylum for their brevity and their restraint. Even if it wasn't designed that way, it was done out of necessity. But I admire the restraint as well and find it easier to go back to those games in particular over and over again.
Nice.
What about you, Steven?
I gotta agree with Joe 100%. Definitely Lego Batman is one of the top tier Lego games out there. It continues a legacy that was created by Lego Star Wars, which I played as well. Those games are so much fun. But the one uniqueness about the Lego Batman is the fact that you get to play replay the game, but from the point of view of the villains.
Yes.
We transport to Arkham Asylum. So it's like, okay, same story, but what were the villains doing the whole time? And it's like, but of course, it does kind of answer the question like why we didn't fight Lego Bane. He just gets captured easily. Like, nah, I wanted to fight Lego Bane and all that stuff. Indeed. Come on. Show Bane some respect. Come on. That's a Latino right there.
Put some respect.
I want to fight the
him.
Latino.
Put some respect.
He broke the bat. He deserves this respect.
Put that respect to that name.
Indeed. Now, for I wouldn't say my all-time favorite, but one of my biggest favorite Batman games has got to be Arkham City.
Sure.
Yes. Out of all the Arkham games, this is the first one that I actually completed because it's the first PS3 game I got when I got my PS3 on Black Friday. And it's honestly the game that pretty much broke all the rules. Like, you're in this, like, pretty much you're in hell right now. You don't want to be Batman in a city full of criminals that you put in there in the first place. And it's just such an immersive story where it's like kind of like a battle to save your own life because you're poisoned by the Joker venom or like the Titan form, that's what it's called. So it's all about like, race against the clock, look for a cure, help out Mr. Freeze. Oh no, the cure's missing. And then by some time, you gotta fight a giant Ra's al Ghul sand monster. That was the Scarecrow levels for that game. And yeah, and then like the shocking revelation, they killed the Joker, spoiler alert. It's like, why would you kill the Joker? It's like, we all know Joker's like the yin to Batman's yang right there. You cannot have Batman without the Joker. So it's kind of, okay, you get rid of his arch enemy. Who is the Batman now? That's kind of why Scarecrow had to be the main villain of Arkham Knight. Yeah. Joker is just like a haunting memory of the Dark Knight. But yeah, with Arkham City, it's just a lot of fun. One of my biggest memories was this. At the beginning of the game, you play as Bruce Wayne, who gets imprisoned and taken to Arkham City. I was playing the game in my living room. My dad was sitting right next to me because that's where my PS3 was. And I remember that when you're all handcuffed and you're kneeling next to the Penguin, and he's just beating the crap out of you. But you gotta, press the like triangle, like block the punch and break his arm. I was waiting for that, like press this, and never showed up. So I was just getting the crap being out of me. I could see my dad going, Steven, he's getting his ass kicked. Do something. Oh. Okay. I press triangle. Oh, there we go. That's what I was supposed to do. And then I just beat everybody up. Okay, now I get it. But yeah, it is still a lot of fun.
I know Steven's dad. This is why it's so funny to me. Okay, I know Steve.
Yeah, he didn't say that, but I heard that like that's like the disapproval. Like, Steven, do something. Oh yeah, I got it. Press the button. But yeah, the Arkham City game, that is just my top tier Batman experience right there.
It's funny. Yeah. Before we go to Hans, I'm glad you brought up Arkham Knight though, because I will say my favorite thing about Arkham Knight is that Mark Hamill played us good, because on social media, on interviews, he's like, I'm done playing I'm never playing the Joker again after Arkham City. It's done. He died. And then that first moment where you know that you're sick as Batman and you see him, it's a jump scare, and it's so well done, and it's so brilliant. It shows the brilliant evolution of these games, even if they aren't always pristine. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I do love that surprise that Mark Hamill's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm never going to play this character again, guys. I'm sorry. I can't. And then there he is.
And then he gives us a musical number in Arkham Knight.
Oh man, that musical number is some good shit. What about you, Hans? What's your favorite Batman game?
I mean, y'all really touched everything, really. So
really not Dark Tomorrow, the other GameCube Batman game, not that.
I hadn't even played that one, to be quite honest, but
your life is better for it.
But yeah, I mean, to me, the Arkham series is arguably one of the best Batman games I ever played, and I even played the last two of them. So that says something. And I just like the stories, especially in Arkham City, Because yes, I'm one of those guys that like to play the games for the story. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sure. No, that's totally
you're
legit.
good company.
Yeah, you're good company here.
And so, yeah, the whole thing with the Joker and the death of the Joker, now that Steven brought it up, man, it was emotional. I think I almost shedded a tear when seeing Batman carrying the Joker. I was like, oh no, this is actually over. And yeah, with the whole Mark Hamill saying this is his last time he's going to voice the Joker, I was like, no, it's like, this can't happen. But, you know, it did. And yeah, that emotional roller coaster. But what I also like about Arkham City is all these little Easter eggs you see all around. Like right from the beginning, you know, you kind of see Black Mask getting like harassed by other people and just like really exploring, looking around and just having fun with it, you know. With Arkham Asylum, it was the same thing too, but obviously, as we always said, it's a little closed than Arkham City. But I mean, in Arkham City, Batman beats up a freaking shark. I mean, where did he get that shark in the city? How did the penguin get it out of all people? I have no idea.
Okay, that was a jump scare.
Yes,
it
was.
fell off the ice.
For me,
go in the water. Oh shit.
For me, that's saying something because of my fear of sharks. All right, when that shark just comes out of nowhere in the ice water, out of all places too. And then when you have to get that boat for Batman to cross over, I was like, oh no, I can't do this. I can't do this. Then it pops up and then Batman just punches it. And I was like, yeah, you know, I beat up a shark. All right.
I don't know what it is, but I don't even go like, oh, sharks are a favorite animal or something like that. Whenever they show up in a DC video game, it is a sign of quality.
Yes.
When I first played Injustice, and it's like, wait a minute, Aquaman can summon sharks? All right, I'm in. This is great.
Exactly.
You fight a shark in Arkham City. Like, I don't know why, but it just is a good thing.
But it just shows how much fun and the things that you could do. And that freedom that you have, you know, we come a long way since that 89 game. So, yeah. And, you know, I appreciate for it. You know, I don't play a lot of video games, but this one does render me in my mind and my heart for sure. So,
yeah.
It's not just a good Batman game. It's a fantastic game.
Yeah, I think that's what's key about the Arkham series and the more recent Batman games, the fighting games like Injustice 1 and 2. Like, they're great games first and foremost. And then they are starring these characters that we love. And I think that's a key thing that makes those games more of a success, right? Like Spider-Man is a good game, but it's also a great Spider-Man game, right? Because it uses that character well. Well, I want to thank you both again for joining me and Geoff to talk about Batman here on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Indeed. Yes, for
absolutely.
sure.
Please check out hashtag Dark Knight Fortnight, not spelled like the game Fortnite, the other
Yes,
way.
we gotta
the
make that
proper way
clear.
to spell Fortnite, to see all of the podcasts coming out under this umbrella of coverage. Also, if you're listening, what's your favorite Batman game? There's so many games we didn't mention. There are just a ridiculous amount of Batman games, a dearth, if you will. So please let us know what your favorites are. Is it something we never mentioned? Is it something that you don't think anyone else has played? Is it also the Arkham games? Tell us why. We always love to hear what games y'all are playing out there.
Yeah, and even if it's a game that maybe it's not your favorite Batman game, but you feel more people should know about it, we want to hear about it because there's so many video games out there, and even under a franchise, a character, a license, few people play all of them, and this helps keep everything going, and we all keep each other informed and entertained, and we want to hear from you about all of these. You can email us or find us on Twitter, most social media, funandgamespod, funandgamespod@gmail.com, so that you can reach out, let us know, and we can keep all of that going. You can also go on to certainpov.com to check out not just this show, but all the other fantastic shows on the network, as well as many that are participating in hashtag Dark Knight Fortnight. And you can find a permanent invite link to our Discord server where we continue all of these wild discussions, and we want you to be a part of that.
Yeah. And also, before we go, Hans and Steven, why don't you tell folks where they can find you on the internet and find all the stuff that you guys make?
Sure, absolutely. You can find me, the Real Movie Critic. Well, I'll start with Twitter and Instagram. That's at RealCritic34, real spelled as in REAL. You could also catch my blog where I talk about all the recent movies that are coming out at realmoviecritic.com. You could also find me on Facebook too. Like me there at Real Movie Critic. You know, I'm practically in every social media except for like TikTok, but that may change in the near future. Who knows?
Yes.
But yeah, that's where you could catch me. But also, you could also find Steven, who will talk more about the show and where you can find us there.
Indeed. We are the Real Movie Critic versus the Cynic Guy at CertainPOV.com, also on Spotify and iTunes. We are a film critique show where we discuss the latest movie news, discuss some trailers, and review the latest movies that come out the weekend of, as well as so many bad impressions and just plain chaos.
Yes, a lot of bad impressions. And also part of the hashtag Dark Knight Fortnight, we have our battles of the cinematic Batmans, which probably when this came out, we're starting our semifinals. So when this is coming out. So.
Indeed. Yes. And you can follow me on my YouTube at DirectormanProd and my Instagram at CineGuySteven. That's at CineGuySteven for more fun reviews.
Do that. Go check out all the stuff that they're doing. The Monday after this, they will have their fresh takes on the Batman. So don't miss that out as well.
For sure.
And yeah, you can also rate and review this show wherever you get your podcasts. There's now the ability to rate and review on Amazon Podcasts, on Audible, on Spotify, on iTunes. Please write us a rating and review. It helps other folks find this incredible community. Join our Discord server. If you want to talk about Batman, we're going to be talking about Batman everywhere for 2 weeks. So please join us in that incredible conversation. Tell us what your favorite Batman property is and why it's the Batman the Animated Series TV show, because it is the best Batman thing ever made. Anyway.
Yes, and tell me how I can get a copy of the Sega CD release of The Adventures of Batman and Robin, the very first Batman title to feature the voices of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, as well as just a nice game. And yeah, we're going to be talking about Batman all across those channels, and we will want you to be a part of that. We want to hear about your favorite Batman gadgets, the properties that you want to see adapted and beyond, because this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Man, that movie was excellent.
It really was. Totally blew my expectations away.
I know, right? Now I really want to tell everyone about it. But I'm not sure how.
Yeah. If only there was a podcast dedicated to reviewing films and discussing the latest news and trailers on upcoming films. That would be nice.
Yes, for sure. And we can call it the Cineguy Show.
What? No. It will be called Real Movie Critic Unleashed.
No. How about Cineguy featuring Real Movie Critic?
How about the Real Movie Critic and his sidekick, the Cineguy?
CG and RMC.
RMC and CG.
The Real Movie Critic versus the Cineguy. Only at CertainPOV.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're going down, critic.
Bring it on, guy.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.